Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 168. I'm talking to Aleksandar Svetski. He is a Bitcoiner. He's a co-author with Mark Moss of the Uncommunist Manifesto. We're going to talk about that, what he thinks about Bitcoin and some other things that have recently happened in the Bitcoin community. How you doing, Alex?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on short notice.
Yeah, thanks for coming on too. I always like to start out. How did you get into all this Bitcoin and stuff, uncommunism?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was always always had a bit of a anti-authoritarian bent. I mean, that's changed a little bit these days. I'm a bit more pro-authoritarian, actually. But the when I was young, I got into university, scholarship recipient, all this sort of stuff. And instead of buying textbooks with my scholarship money, I put it on the stock market, traded my scholarship money to 10x what it was. I thought I was a genius. I built a spreadsheet and I extrapolated out. I was like, at this rate, I'll be a billionaire by the time I'm 25. And I was like, I thought I had it all figured out, and then within a year I lost everything. Within another year I margin called myself into $250,000 in debt, and basically it started my 20s majorly in debt, and this was sort of 2007, 2008. And anyway, in trying to figure out what the hell I did wrong, I stumbled across all the gold and silver guys. So your old Mike Maloney's and your Doug Casey's and Max Kaiser's and all that sort of stuff in the early days of YouTube, and yeah, basically that sort of planted the seeds for me, and I never took, much notice of Bitcoin back then. I think I saw Max Kaiser or something jumping up and down on a couch yelling at people about Bitcoin, and I was like, yeah, whatever. I was a gold and silver hard money guy, and I stuck around there. I went and built software for a number of years, different businesses, and it wasn't until 2015, 2016 again that I reacquainted myself with Bitcoin, and it was at a time when I was looking for something to sink my teeth into, and yeah, the timing was great. I'd already been previously primed with gold silver stuff. I was a little bit more mature, and as I started going down that rabbit hole, I was like, holy shit, there's something big here. And yeah, I shitcoined a little bit in the beginning, but I very quickly realized that Bitcoin is the thing that matters most, and just economically, philosophically, morally, spiritually, all this sort of stuff. So I really doubled down. I was one of the sort of earlier Bitcoin maxes in Australia. And yeah, man, that sort of one thing led to another. I'd say then 2020 really radicalized me. And that's when my sort of more political leanings evolved. I mean, Bitcoin fundamentally made me a libertarian. And then since then I've become more of a authoritarian libertarian, since, all the stupidity that we had from clown world over the last couple of years. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Yeah, if you're from Australia, I mean, it was pretty awful there. You're pretty well traveled though, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been to about 50 countries. Yeah.
Yeah, I know for a while, even if you were an Australian citizen, you couldn't go back there. How long was that?
Yeah, correct. I mean, I never went back. That's the thing. So I left in 2019 before all the crazy shit happened. And then when I saw what was going on, I was like, well, fuck that. I'm not going, because if I want to leave, they're going to trap me. So there was a time that I wanted to go back. I was stuck in Germany and I wanted to travel back and I just couldn't. And it was a mixture of Germany wouldn't let me leave and Australia wouldn't let me enter. So I was like, fuck, what can I do? Yeah.
Yeah, I've not been to Australia, but I'd probably like to go just because it's
a beautiful country.
It's still such a wild place. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in Australia that wants to kill you, whether it be the snakes or whatever. The outback. It can definitely be one of those, an interesting experience, I'm sure. But but I don't know what to make of the politics there right now. But
I mean, look, it's. The everything wanting to kill you is a bit of an over an exaggeration, I guess. I never felt that when I was there, but maybe that's just a function of me having grown up there. But I mean, it's it's one of the safest countries in the world fundamentally. Look, it's genuinely a beautiful place. It was built on Western values, and as much as it's degrading and all the weird and stupid shit is going on, like it's still a gorgeous place to live. And I've come to appreciate it more after traveling around the world. But I think I've done my 30 years there, and now I want to do something different with my life.
Yeah, and if you got family, since you're well traveled, what do you think are you got an opinion on what the best places to live now if you are a Bitcoiner, or the worst places to live if you're a Bitcoiner? Well, I suppose North Korea is the worst place to live if you're a Bitcoiner, but
I mean, who knows? Maybe it's the best place, and we just get told that it's the worst place. At
yeah,
this point, you can't really fucking trust anything, honestly. Look, it's tricky, man. I don't know, honestly. Like sometimes I think Latin America, but there's like lots of problems with Latin America, which just drive you crazy on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes I think America, honestly, like if you can afford it and you're in Texas or Florida or something like that, you'll you can do really well. And there's lots of things you can there's lots of privileges in America that you just don't get elsewhere. I mean, Dubai seems to be a fantastic place, which looks very interesting. I mean, if you want to hustle, the problem it obviously gets a little bit too hot most of the year. So I think that's a tough one to answer. Like I used to be more certain, and honestly, the more I've traveled, the less certain I've become, because what I've come to understand is that people are just fundamentally different. There's people who love Costa Rica, for example, and I have a special place in my heart for Costa Rica, but I don't like it that much, and I don't think I can live there. Like the jungle drives me crazy, and just not having access to simple things like a fucking Uber, for example, just drives me mental. So it's horses for courses, and I don't think even me personally, like I would live in one place for the rest of my life. Like my ideal would be living part of the year in a city kind of place. So whether that's in New York or a Dubai or something like that, probably more Dubai than New York, just considering where the status of New York. Then I would have part of the year be in like a beach location, whether it's something like Australia or southern Brazil or whatever, and then the other part of the year in like a classical architectural location like a Europe. And once again, Europe's not great from a Bitcoin standpoint, but Europe is the cradle of civilization, and for me personally, that's a draw card. So, yeah, horses for courses. Each person is a bit different. I don't know how to answer that beyond that.
You mentioned Latin America. Got to ask, what do you think about Javier Milei?
Oh man, my pinned tweet says it all. There was a tweet that went a little viral. I think the guy's a legend. I think he's got the energy of a Trump and the policy of a Ron Paul, which is basically the perfect mix for a modern leader. I think he's a godsend for Argentina. I hope he's not a psyop. I hope it's not all a scam. I hope he doesn't get killed if he's the real deal. But yeah, I think that the guy has really captured the zeitgeist and the energy, and I love what I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's great. He's made it he's made it cool to advocate for freedom. So
Totally.
So what are some of the principles in your book, the Uncommunist Manifesto?
I mean, there's loads of principles, but if I had to like sort of extract a couple, I would say we try and advocate for this idea that capitalism is not really a political modality. It's a organic process. So like if you stop for a minute and you define what capital is, well, you've got sort of what I'd call tangible and intangible capital, or maybe layer 1 and layer 2 capital. Layer 1 capital is energy, time, and resources, right? These are the building blocks of life and civilization that we have to deal with. And then we have the more intangible, the layer 2 stuff, which is things like reputation, ideas, honor, stuff like that, right? And basically, if that's capital, capitalism is the process of using that capital effectively and efficiently. And if you really think about it, all living creatures, all systems look to use their capital as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So like, capitalism is, analogous in that sense to the process of life or progress or whatever you want to call it. So we make this claim in the book that, hey, look, capitalism is fundamentally a natural process. And what we should be doing, and to the extent that capitalism, you could define it as a political modality, it is the modality that allows for the natural process of capitalism to occur, as unrestricted and as unbounded as possible. And the thing is, we can never do that. As soon as you as soon as you introduce politics into a system, you are in some way, shape, or form distorting the natural process. But the less you distort it, the more capitalistic it is, right? And that's essentially one of the big takeaways, I believe, from the book. Another one that we really lean into is this idea of the axis of the struggle is not oppressed and oppressor and all this sort of victimhood bullshit that you hear from the Marxists, but more so collectivist coercion. So this state bureaucratic apparatus that is like leeching and extracting wealth from individuals and and funneling it through some sort of as I said, bureaucratic longhouse basically, versus the individual and tribal desire to produce, create, and live a better life, right? And that's a more accurate axis, for the struggle of humanity and what we've gone through in a historical capacity. So there's sort of two big takeaways. There's obviously a bunch of others in there, but essentially what we tried to do was take a bunch of complex ideas, which we haven't thought of something new here. Like maybe our approach on how we define capitalism is relatively novelish, but I'm sure Mises or Hopper or someone like that has written about this. The difference is, and why someone might want to pick up the Uncommunist Manifesto, is that it takes these complex ideas and distills them into 85 pages and 4 simple chapters that you can hand out to anybody. And I think one of the things we suffer from today is like attention deficit. We got too many things going. Nobody has time to read. What's Mises's fucking book, Human Action? Like no one has time to read these long textbooks. Rothbardian, the Libertarian Manifesto and all this sort of stuff. But everyone's got time to read a book that'll take 60 to 90 minutes to hit and that they can share around with people. So that was the premise. That's why we wanted to do it. And yeah, I think it comes with, as I said, a couple really poignant takeaways, and you can walk away with 4 or 5 things that you'll vividly remember and that you'll easily be able to explain thereafter.
Yeah, that's true. I would never give Human Action to a new person. I probably wouldn't give Mises to a new person just because he's hard to read. I mean,
he's dry. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt is a good book.
That's a good one. Yep.
I think Road to Serfdom by Hayek is a good book. They're pretty simple. Yeah, it's a lot of, if you want to give them a short book. And some will say because it's small too, The Law by Bastiat, Friedrich Bastiat.
That's a great one. Yeah, that was one of the inspirations, actually. So we wanted to, that was actually, when we looked at it, it was Anatomy of the State and The Law by Bastiat were kind of like length and size and style examples for us. And, I think we managed to hit that nail on the head. Like it's concise and it's more current than obviously Bastiat and more current than Anatomy of the State. And, I think we achieved that to a large degree.
Yes, definitely. Who else has influenced you?
I mean, recently in the last couple of years, I've been down the Spengler, Nietzsche, Evola, and sort of more right-wing rabbit hole. And I found even more nuanced thinking that at least the Austrians are probably the most nuanced thinkers.
Who?
And then the Austrians. So your Mises and your Rothbards and stuff like that, I think are really
I thought you were saying somebody's name. Okay, yeah.
No. Yeah, they're probably the most nuanced and first principles thinkers ever. But the Spenglers and the Nietzsches of the world are the most ascendant, energetic and vital thinkers. So like Ernst Junger and those kind of people, they don't gel well with the Austrians entirely, and they have they view the world through more than just an economic lens, but I find them very, very fascinating. So that's a lot of my recent thinking has been influenced by those guys.
Is that Oswald Spengler?
Yeah, Oswald Spengler. He's got a fantastic book called Man and Technics, which is, once again, it's like a short, it's a short book. It's like Anatomy of the State, or Bastiat's thing, but man, it hits you hard, and it's so fucking good.
Yeah.
That's actually, I used to give away Anatomy of the State to people. I give away Man and Technics now.
So you said Manatechnics?
Man and Technics.
Oh, Man and Techniques. Okay. Or Technics. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that sounds, I've not heard of that book. It sounds interesting. Yeah, it's 1931.
Yeah.
What do you think about Nietzsche? I mean, what would Nietzsche think of all this? You think Nietzsche would be a Bitcoiner?
Most likely. I think, Nietzsche would be a troll and probably a Bitcoin maxi. And, Nietzsche would be shitposting on Twitter and just, calling people turds and retards and everything like that. Nietzsche was very interesting. He was, he was the first digital nomad. He was a really deep and nuanced thinker. I mean, a lot of the greatest aphorisms, things like "what doesn't kill you makes you stronger," sort of come from Nietzsche. He's a really profound thinker, and I think his whole sort of theory was that, look, life is hard, life is a bitch, but despite the pain, despite the suffering, despite so this is where Buddhism kind of goes into life is suffering, but if you detach yourself from life, you will no longer feel suffering, and nirvana is the pathway. The pathway to nirvana is through detachment. Nietzsche sort of said, no, fuck that shit. Life is suffering. I agree with the Buddha to that extent, but the path to victory is through vitality, through energy, through spark, and sure. The fact that life, the fact that we have the capacity as human beings to give meaning or not to give meaning to life can lead to nihilism, but in the face of nihilism, the capacity for the human spirit to rise above it and still seek to grow and to reach and to expand is what makes humanity fundamentally exceptional and special. And that was, I believe, his philosophy. And a lot of leftist retards completely misinterpret Nietzsche. They think he was the king of nihilism when he wasn't. Like, his whole philosophy was about living despite the reality of nihilism. And I think a lot of Christians also fundamentally get him wrong. Like, I sort of envision, the future of the world, the strongest energy being like almost like a Christian Nietzscheanism, that comes together, like Christo-Nietzschean, right, is like sort of my philosophy. In fact, my philosophy of life is Christo-Hopper-Nietzschean. Like, if I could blend Christianity, Hoppianism, or Hopper's, philosophy and Nietzsche's philosophy, like the Venn diagram of those three is where I believe, the most powerful, vital, and accurate vision of life is.
What do you like best about Hans Hermann Hoppe?
He's just based as fuck, he's not your traditional libertarian. Like, he's an aristocratic, monarchist leaning libertarian who understands that, it's not just about the nap and going off and seasteading somewhere and like, it's just about freedom and all this sort of shit. He's got strong principles. He understands that leadership is extremely important. In a libertarian context. Like, he takes the most authoritarian view on libertarianism that there is, and I really, really respect and appreciate that about him. He's the most like exclusive libertarian.
Yeah, one thing I liked about Democracy, the God That Failed.
Great book.
I assume but I realized the whole thing about time preference also applies to a publicly traded corporation versus a privately owned business.
What do you mean?
Well, if I have a business and I own it privately, I want my business to be successful. I want to pass that business on to my kids and onto their kids. I'm thinking long term. Whereas if I'm the CEO of a publicly traded corporation, all I care about are maybe 2 or 3 annual reports. I don't care about anything past that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, time preference is always skewed when we spread incentives and distort and mess around with all of that stuff, and it is tricky. I think he's got some real interesting insights there.
Yeah, and I sent him an email, asked him about it. They said, yeah, I agree. Yeah, very much so. Anything else? It looks like you got a new book coming out. What's that about?
Yeah, that's called The Bushido of Bitcoin, and that one is it's a culmination of my last 2 years of reading, research, and thinking about if the premise is that Bitcoin's going to win and we're going to end up on a Bitcoin standard, and we sort of take Saifedean's whole Bitcoin standard idea as like fundamental, like that's where we're going to end up. The question that comes after that, and this is why I believe it's going to be the most important Bitcoin book written after the Bitcoin standard, is like, we've got the Bitcoin standard, and then it's what we do with the Bitcoin standard. And that's essentially the nature of this book, is who do we become after a Bitcoin standard? Like, what kind of culture do we build? Because a lot of people think, just willy-nilly, oh yeah, Bitcoin fixes this. But in my opinion, that's not, that's just, it's not a given. Like, to build a culture, to build a civilization, there needs to be an intent and a direction, and there needs to be some sort of a will that goes into it. And the intention needs to be underpinned by a particular set of virtues, and I say virtues, not values, because values are something you desire, whereas virtues are something you do. And I said, okay, so if we're going to look to inculcate or develop virtues in ourselves, and therefore by extension the rest of our community and civilization, what should those virtues be? And because there's not a lot, there's like 15 or 20 virtues in total, right? I looked back at the most successful civilizations, and then I looked at the cultures that preceded those civilizations. And funny enough, two things I noticed. One is that the majority of those cultures were warrior cultures that preceded the great civilizations. And number two is that the virtues they lived by, so like the chivalric code, the Roman virtues, the Christian West, the Bushido. So Bushido means way of the warrior. So it was the virtues that the Japanese samurai lived by. There was a massive overlap across all of them. So I extracted what I believe were the top 10 virtues that mapped best across all of these. And I spend basically 100,000 words. So it's a book about 10 times the size of the Uncommunist Manifesto, analyzing all of these virtues through a historical lens. I look at the etymology of the words in both Japanese and in English, and the Latin roots and the Proto-European roots, and I sort of understand where these words come from, where the energy of these words comes from, where examples and anecdotes of how that's been represented in the world, and then I relate that back to also Bitcoin, each virtue. And then I go on to, ask a bunch of really tough questions around like, wealth and what that means. Does wealth actually corrupt civilization? Is it actually the gateway to the weak men bring bad times stage of civilization? So all these sort of tough questions, is it different this time with Bitcoin because we have an incorruptible monetary layer and all this sort of stuff? So it's, it's a large book. It's a very challenging book. It's going to rub people simultaneously the wrong way and the right way. It's going to drive people crazy. And I think, ultimately it's going to be a really special book. That's well, at least I hope. That's I'm obviously biased because I wrote it.
The interesting thing about warrior cultures is I think there was a code of honor in warrior cultures, and
Mm-hmm.
we used to allow dueling in this country.
Yes, I have a whole chapter on dueling.
And I also think and what we seem to be mired in right now, especially in the West, is what I would call victim culture,
Mm-hmm.
where your
Mm-hmm.
currency is about how much of a victim I can be,
Correct.
and based on that, anything goes to get even.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Nietzsche would have been in favor of that. I think
Correct. Yeah, Nietzsche was
yeah.
warrior culture, advocate.
Any opinions on Ayn Rand?
She's fucking fantastic. I love her work. In fact, I like her more than libertarians. I think she was a little bit more precise and realistic about the nature of governance, particularly. So yeah, love her. I think Atlas Shrugged is in the top 5 most important books ever written, and I used to say that everybody on the planet should read Atlas Shrugged. I don't think everybody can, unfortunately, but yeah, brilliant thinker, brilliant mind, incredible.
It's also quite long.
Yeah, exactly. But it's. I mean, for me, I love that because I love to listen to fiction. I don't read fiction. I exclusively read nonfiction. So if it's essays or books or whatever, but I love listening. And Scott Brick's narration on Audible is fucking incredible, man. I listen to it almost every year.
Oh, wow. What are the other 5 books in your opinion?
Shogun by James Clavell, which is also sort of historic fiction. It is a tough one because there's so many, and usually on the top of my head. But what's another one? Like these days I do much more fiction than anything else. I think the Hyperion series by Dan Simmons is very, 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 very profound and very good. What else? Anything by Wilbur Smith, which is also historical fiction. Particularly the Courtney series and the rise of South Africa, and you sort of see how South Africa is basically a proxy for where the West is going, and it's very, very, very good as well. And then in terms of nonfiction, definitely like Democracy, The God That Failed, Man and Technics, Anatomy of the State, Uncommunist Manifesto, of course. And War Speak by Lise Van Boxel, which is an overview on Nietzsche's work. Fucking love that.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why Musk is so concerned about the wokeism in the West right now is he already saw it happen in South Africa.
In South Africa, totally, yeah. He's got a visceral relationship to that.
Yeah, I don't always agree with Musk, but I think he's fighting a lot of good fights. I think he's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah. I mean, Bitcoin has given him a lot of shit because of the Dogecoin stuff, and I get it. But at the end of the day, everyone's got a bit of an ego, and that's his sort of little ego trip, and he can have it. You got to take the good with the bad, basically. And he fundamentally is a lot more good than bad.
I approach my thinkers or philosophers as a cafeteria. I mean, I can take one book I like. I can not take a book I don't like. It's that nobody's. You don't have to treat everybody as a package deal.
Totally.
Yeah. So interesting. So where do you think the West is headed right now? It's because it sounds like you've looked into a lot of history and you understand some of these patterns that happen.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a big question. I think the West will always win. That is just fundamentally the nature of the West is, there's something special about it. And every time it crumbles, something new emerges that is more powerful and more strong. Like you look at, what came after Rome is fundamentally, the foundations of what we're living in today. And, as much as, China and this and that all have technology now, the progenitor of all of that stuff, like technology comes from the West. I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Like the West is the one that created basically everything, and everyone else copies. Sure, maybe the long tail of innovation might come from somewhere else, but the internet, social media, like everything that is modern and powerful, the smartphone came from the West, and that I believe will continue for arguably forever. Definitely not going to come from Africa, Asia, South America, or any of that sort of stuff. So, that being said, the West is going through a major transformation, and there will be, we are probably, living through the equivalent of the fall of Rome right now. But as I said, through that will emerge something else. And if you look at, there's a really interesting analogy, which is, the people who came and conquered Rome during the fall were also Westerners, the barbarians, the Germanic tribes. They were nomads. They were these like free-floating, vital, energetic, powerful people that came and sacked, quote unquote, Rome, and they took on, elements of Rome that fit. They, took on elements of, this sort of new Christian idea as well that fit. And I fundamentally believe Christianity is European. It's not Judaistic at all. It is fundamentally European religion. And the Europeans, the Germanic West, took that they fused it together, and they built a new culture and therefore new civilization from that. And there's some parallels these days. Is that we've got this sort of Bitcoiners and nomads. This sort of new tribal sort of excited, vital, quote unquote warriors that are emerging. And we are, I think, fundamentally going to pick up or take over elements that are falling apart. And the fall of the US, which is modern Rome, is going to make way for our rise. And that's sort of where I think things are going. I think we're going to see the state paradigm fundamentally shift as well, in the sense that we will have microstates, micronations win, because there's going to be an economic element that you can't hide from. So, the diseconomies of scale that are only made possible through central banking are going to evaporate, which means territories are going to have to operate far more economically. And as a result, they'll get smaller, because, you have this sort of, inherent maximas to operating a territory economically. And, that depends on the terrain, on the culture, on the temperature, on the weather, and all this sort of shit. But, I don't think 300 million people is an economically viable number of people to govern under one set of rules. But I think you can split that into 50 territories, which is why, I think the US, for example, moved towards states, and, likewise with most of the rest of the world. So that's sort of my theory moving forward.
Yes. Yeah. So you think the US will break up? You think other countries might break up? Like what
Totally.
happened?
Yeah. The European Union is going to fall apart,
Yeah.
and that'll see a resurgence in, European vitality. The US will as well. We will most likely see that in Latin America too. I mean, Brazil should definitely be split up into like 3 or 4 pieces. Like the South is the engine of industry in Brazil, and the North doesn't do fucking anything. I guess Argentina's smaller in population, so it may be able to be one thing. But yeah, the more things break up, the better.
Yeah, well, in some cases too, you've got, a lot, like in Brazil, in Argentina, you've got one really dominant metropolitan area. So
Exactly.
I don't know if you're going to break up Buenos Aires, but that might be what you'd end up breaking up,
Exactly. Yeah. The rest of it is relatively empty-ish.
Yeah, how safe is Brazil right now?
I mean, I don't know, because I'm in the south, and I'm in like a very safe area, so like I'm in a bubble. I can't speak to the rest of it. I mean, they say that Brazil is definitely one of the most dangerous on the planet, but I guess it's pockets of Brazil once again. So yeah, that's I don't have a direct answer for that.
Yeah, and Brazil has a lot of different areas. I mean, you've got the 2 major cities,
Yeah, Rio and Sao Paulo. Rio's apparently way more dangerous.
Yeah.
And the favelas there are far more hardcore. But yeah, like I'm definitely not in a place like that.
Well, yeah, and if you're traveling, hopefully to avoid those places. But yeah, but you've also got the smaller towns. You can also go deep into the rainforest.
Yeah, totally.
Well, there are also gangs that hang out in the rainforest too.
Yeah, I can get rid of these fuckers.
Yeah. I mean, that's a place to hide out because nobody wants to go look for them. Yeah. So yeah. What attracted you to Brazil?
There was I mean, Multiple things. I like the southern climate a bit better than the northern climate. It was very easy to get a nomad visa, so I didn't have to deal with too much bureaucracy, which I always like. As soon as I have to deal with bureaucracy, it's like a turn off for me, and that was like what turned me off with the US. I wanted to get a visa there, and like the amount of basically they wanted to anal probe me, just for like a visa. I was like, you know what, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was easy for those reasons, cost effective. My wife and I wanted to pick somewhere where we could both very easily get a visa, and it just ticked all those boxes. So we just went with it.
Yeah, being from Australia, you have pretty easy access to the rest of the Commonwealth of Nations, right?
I mean, yeah, I do. Yeah, well, easier. Yeah.
If you could go anywhere in the Commonwealth, where would you go?
I mean, maybe one of the islands, like your Virgin Islands or something. I mean, I guess because I'm done with Australia, I'm I wouldn't pick it, but maybe traditionally I would have picked Australia. Like New Zealand looks really cool as well, but I just feel like it's too much in the arse end of the world. South Africa is not really part of the Commonwealth anymore, but I have a real calling for Cape Town actually, and I'm seriously considering moving that way at some point, at least trying that out for a couple of years.
Yeah, of course you get a few other nations in Africa that are in the Commonwealth too, but yeah, it might be interesting. Oh yeah, any other places you found that you really liked or that you visited, or any other places you really didn't like?
Oh man, I mean, funny enough, I wasn't a big fan of Salvador, honestly. I mean, I love that Bukele is fixing it. I've got so much respect. I think him and Milei are the two greatest leaders on the planet today. I respect all of that, but I guess having been born in Australia, my standards are a little bit higher. So, and again, I don't say that to like poo-poo the Salvadorians. Like, I love what they're doing, and they are ascendant, which I respect more than anything at this point. But for me personally, like I don't know, I love being in something more modern. I don't like Latin American cities. Like, if I wanted a Latin American city, I would probably go to, like Sao Paulo, for example, which is, 25 million people, like everything you could possibly want is there. But I just don't like Latin American cities. There's way too much traffic, there's shit everywhere. Like, I just don't like the feel of it. So I like, real beach culture, and, Salvador doesn't have the beaches that I want. Like, it's all dark sand and stuff like that. Whereas I love, Brazilian beaches and Australian beaches for me, really,
Yeah,
attract me. So yeah, so I wasn't a big fan of Salvador. Like I think I said earlier, Costa Rica is an interesting one. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I think it's way overpriced for what you get. But, if you're extremely wealthy and you don't give a shit, then, that doesn't matter to you. But I think for most people, like Costa Rica is a bit of a ripoff. Where else did I not like? I mean,
yeah.
other than that, I like most other places, honestly. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of Colombia. We spent some time in Medellin, and it was nice, but it's again, it's a Latin American city. I definitely wouldn't live there long term. Yeah,
There is definitely some crazy traffic in Latin America. I thought San Salvador was probably the worst traffic city I've ever seen.
yeah, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. So that kind of shit just drives me mental.
Yeah, I can see
Where I am, we don't have any of that traffic kind of stuff, man. Like worst case traffic takes you an extra 5-10 minutes to get somewhere, and you're done. So
well,
it's a huge thing
sometimes
for me.
and you said you didn't really like the jungle either, and San Salvador really is kind of surrounded by the jungle.
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
I like the beach, man. Like for me, I need water and beach, and if I'm gonna do city, like 100%, I'm gonna pick Dubai
yeah,
over any Latin American city because it's clean, it's functional, everything works, it's beautiful. The standard is high, all that sort of stuff, and I'm willing to pay the premium for that.
yeah. There's only a few big. And of course, you got some cases where you got really big cities on beaches, but yeah, it's definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, really, there's only a couple. There's Cape Town, there's Bondi, there's Miami, there's Rio, but outside of
Lima.
that, there's Lima, I don't know. I mean, I don't even count that as a
Yeah,
city.
well, some of the Australian cities are on the beach too. Yeah, but
Yeah, well, I mean, Bondi Beach is like the classic, city and beach, and I mean, Bondi is definitely one of the best in the world. Fundamentally, like it's fucking gorgeous. It's close. You know, it's just yeah, Bondi is one of the greatest places to live in the world.
yeah. So, what do you think is the future of what do you think is going to happen with Bitcoin just in the next 5 or 10 years? I don't mean price either. I just mean more adoption, more any breakthroughs or
Yeah, in the next 5 to 10 years, I've got a really accurate answer on this, which is it transitions from the speculative era to the infrastructure era. So, I think Bitcoin's going to evolve over 3 generations, basically. Generation lasting about 20 years. So, just for simplicity's math's sake, let's just say 2010 to 2030, 2030 to 2050, 2050 to 2070, right? And the driver behind that is not technology, not fucking the ETF or any of that sort of stuff. The driver behind the stages of Bitcoin's evolution is generations or demographics, which is kids who are born after 2008, who come of age in 2030, who are 21, 22 years old. They are going to become the innovators and the capital allocators who they just view Bitcoin fundamentally differently to you and I, who were born in the fiat era, and we are transitioning with Bitcoin. They don't know fucking anything other than Bitcoin. They were born with it. They grew up with it. They look at Bitcoin not as a speculative thing that they trade against the dollar. They look at Bitcoin as, oh, it is a fucking tool. It is a monetary protocol that I can build with. So from 2030 onwards, there'll be a real shift to Bitcoin being an infrastructure thing that these people build. And then by the time they have kids and kids born 2030 onwards who come of age in 2050, they'll completely view Bitcoin in a different phase. Like they won't know of a day of fiat, of an age of fiat and all that sort of stuff. And they will take Bitcoin to the final stage of its evolution fundamentally, where it becomes part of the DNA of the global economy. So for the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be in that transition phase where we're 15 years into Bitcoin now, three quarters of the way through the speculative stage, where it is fundamentally measured against the dollar, but that chapter will close in the next 5 to 10 years, and that's going to be very interesting to see. So we've got strong price appreciation before we get to that infrastructure stage, and I think definitely we'll get to 1 to 10 million, somewhere in that range.
yes. This is not financial advice. This is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. Anyway, so yeah, where do you think? With a lot of these regulations coming down on Bitcoin in the USA and some of the other countries, do you think we'll see maybe more Bitcoin projects and developments go to places like El Salvador, or be going offshore just to get away from the regulatory business?
Probably, man. Like, I mean, at least the financial ones,
Yeah.
like they'll look at doing something else. I mean, for me specifically, doing business in the US and in, first world countries still is, simpler, better, and easier. But, people are catching up. Like, as far as I understand, establishing a company and doing all that sort of stuff in Salvador seems to be much easier these days.
Yeah.
And, that's a good thing. So, power to them. I hope that happens more, and I hope that places that make business easier to do get more businesses. Something I'd like to do is, one day run for president of Macedonia, and I would like to take over the country and do what Bukele did in Salvador over there, and I would fundamentally make all corporate setups happen online. You set up a company, set up online, you domicile there, tax free, done, boom, 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 and bring fucking business there. The territories that do that intelligently are going to win.
Why Macedonia?
My blood. That's where my parents are from originally, and I'd like to bring back the glory days of Macedon.
Alexander, yes.
Yes, indeed.
There's I don't know if you know about it, but there's a what I don't know if you've heard of in the U.S. They call it the Free State Project, and the idea is for
Yeah, New
people to
Hampshire. Yeah.
concentrate. There's also in Europe, it's called Monte Libero, but it's about getting a bunch of libertarians to move to Montenegro and they'll take over there. And from what I've heard right now, it's a lot of Russians. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't heard about that before. I mean,
well, that's not too far from Macedonia either. So.
Yeah, next door, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and I heard it's got great beaches too, so you might like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the big downsides of fucking Macedonia is it's landlocked. Fucking hell. So yeah. I mean, I might have to go and rule the country 6 months of the year, and then the other 6 months go to the beach.
Yes. Yeah. Do you have any opinions on the breakup of the former Yugoslavia? It was pretty messy there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the history well enough. Like, all I can do is talk to my instinct, which is, my understanding, it was a fucking commie state. The balkanization was bound to happen because these people, I mean, Slavs are all, and particularly Balkan Slavs, they're all sort of, interrelated in some capacity. But man, they've been warring with each other since the beginning of time. Back when they were Illyrians and Macedonians and Greeks and what was the other major Thracians and all this sort of stuff. Like, they all fucking hated each other from back then. They all were warring from back then, trying to slap them all together into one, neat sort of pile. Not a good idea. It was never going to work. And obviously it all turned to shit. I don't think, like, you can have an alliance amongst them, like a league, but you can't, make them all one country. Unfortunately, Macedonia consistently got the short straw out of that. Over time just became this landlocked little shithole that is, economically defunct at the moment. So yeah, it's a sad, shitty story over there.
Since you mentioned your wife, you got any kids or?
Hopefully on the way for next year. That's the plan.
Yeah, that'll be, yeah. So, I should ask too, since you're in Brazil, what'd you think about Lula and Bolsonaro?
I mean, Bolsonaro is a fucking legend, man. I love that guy. It was such a shame that piece of shit Lula, I think he's one of the most there's disgusting, politicians. Lula for me is up there in the top 5, top 3 most disgusting parasitical pieces of shit to walk the planet. If that doesn't say how I feel, I don't know how else I could describe it, but it was a real shame what happened. And, Bolsonaro, I mean, when it really came time, obviously he was, a lot of people were like, oh yeah, he pussied out, he chickened out. But I mean, it's hard, when you have a family and this and that, I am sure whatever it is, the deep state, the Brazilian state, whatever it is, threatened his family, this and that. And, it's easy for us to be armchair commentators and say, oh, I would have done differently, when in reality, if you would have done differently, why the fuck are you not president? So shut the fuck up, basically.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's a real shame. And, I read the other week that, Bolsonaro has been indicted on having a fake vax pass or something. They're trying to get him on that. And man, that just, one, it made me love him even more. And 2, just made me more pissed off that, if that's what they end up getting him on, one, ultra based, and B, just tells you how corrupt and fucking shit the system is over here as well.
America's starting to go that way too. I don't know if you've heard some of the things Trump's been fined for.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all basically Brazil and America real analogs of each other. It's really funny to watch. Yeah. Bolsonaro is basically Brazil's Trump.
Well, one person I know, he describes America as a banana republic with air conditioning.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's because a lot of the banana republics still don't have air conditioning, but yeah. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting too. I have to say too, I kind of felt more confident about El Salvador when I saw it, just because it seemed like that was a country that was still very pro-family versus other Latin American countries. I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Getting married, having kids. I mean, the women really still looked like women there, and I was really impressed with that. It's just, and I have noticed too, I think sometimes smaller countries rise and fall. I mean, somebody posted on social media once, I saw the president's family in McDonald's.
Yeah.
And the president still gets out and lives like a regular person. And, Milei does that too. I don't know if you've seen those videos.
Yeah. On him on the plane and shit
Milei
like
on
that.
regular airlines and stuff like that. I tell people he flies regular airlines, and they're amazed.
Yep.
It's a real, some, and I think they almost have to kind of at least talk about being pro USA, because you never know if the USA might just say, "Oh, let's get rid of this guy. We don't like what he's doing." We'll just suddenly you'll end up gone. But yeah.
Yeah, no, he's fucking awesome, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely awesome what's happening. I'm really very optimistic time to be alive. And that's why I've done 39 shows about melee on this podcast. So it's a
wow, holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, I think you're I haven't had anybody living in Brazil yet on, so I'm glad to get a Brazilian perspective.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I had a friend who unfortunately passed away, but at a younger age. But he was actually a police officer in Brazil for 10 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, in Sao Paulo. One thing that I thought was telling is I said he didn't really think that much of an American police officer. I thought, and you were in a much more dangerous place than any American city. But
yeah.
Because I can imagine if you're a police officer in a big city, you're probably going to eventually get to know every part of the city. But,
well, yeah, that, and you're going to get to know the ugly parts and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it would be wild.
Yeah, but you're in a smaller town, it sounds like.
Exactly, yeah, much smaller, man. Tiny, and the population of the entire city is 500,000, so.
But is it pretty easy to, but since you travel, is it pretty easy to travel from there? Or?
It is, yeah, they've got a great airport, so it's not an international airport per se, but it gets you to São Paulo, within an hour and a bit, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah, is Sao Paulo usually, or Sao Paulo and both Rio kind of the hubs for Brazil?
Exactly, yeah, they're the major ones.
Yeah, because they're the two big cities, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, most of the countries in South America just really have one airport hub, but, Brazil's large enough. And Sao Paulo and Rio aren't that far apart, though, are they?
No, they're not. They're actually an hour flight, so they're close to each other, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Australia has 3 major airports, like Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne, and they're not far from each other either. They're each an hour flight from each other. So kind of similar-ish to Brazil in that sense.
Yeah, America, you never know where you might end up. There's
totally. Yeah, you guys have like fucking a million airports.
Well, the different airlines have their own, hubs here and there.
Yeah.
It's you could change planes lots of places in America. It's different airlines.
It's a marvel of modern engineering, honestly. Like the interconnectedness of the airport thing in America. It's profound. It's just such a shame, the clown show's taken over, man, because, America's got so much going for it. But, yeah, anyway, we could get into that conversation. That'll open up.
Yeah, I think, America had so much potential for good, and I think there's just, and I guess that's just why I get so disgusted is if I didn't think there was so much potential for good here, I probably wouldn't be as happy. We've had so many innovators and creators and people who do, just do easy things. Oh, by the way, what do you think about the COPA lawsuit with Craig Wright?
I mean, I didn't watch anything on that, man, honestly. So I I just know that Craig Wright's a retard, and the fact that he lost makes me happy. And finally, I guess that stuff is over now. I don't really know what that means, but yeah, fuck him, basically.
Do you have any theories on who Satoshi Nakamoto actually is?
Man, everyone's got a theory. I mean, I don't know. Honestly, at this point, I for a while I thought it was the what's the face?
Hal Finney?
Hal, yeah, for a bit. But yeah, I don't know if that people that I'm close to that are sort of really early Bitcoiners kind of have debunked that for me. There's a chance that it's like a Peter Todd or something like that. There's even a theory that it actually could be Julian Assange, because he's actually, people don't actually realize, but he was actually a cryptographer and a hardcore cryptographer. So that's a very interesting theory. There's also my favorite theory, which is Paul LaRue, who was a South African or maybe Zimbabwean, I don't know, but he was a fucking legend. At one point, he wanted to take over Somalia, and he was a cryptographer too. So that would be fucking cool. If he ended up being Satoshi, I would laugh my ass off because that would be the funniest story of all.
Yeah, I wonder if we ever really will find out, though. It's amazing they've been able to keep this secret for so long.
Yeah.
Whoever it is. And the other question, too, is what happens to the Bitcoin?
Yeah. Well, who cares? I mean, if Satoshi does come one day, he got himself, somewhat of a pre-mine, and he holds, what is that, 5% of the network. Good on him. He deserves it. And if it never goes and it becomes this sort of monument and treasure, like Thomas Strelak called it, then that is just as beautiful.
I'm surprised nobody out there has tried to hack that. I mean, just because
they have, of course.
The payoff is so great, though. It's certainly worth
that's
it.
That's exactly what was happening with Craig Wright in the background. Like, what do you think dipshit Calvin Ayre was doing? They were, using supercomputers to try and crack it, so that they could, get the private key in time to prove it, and they just never got around to it.
This is one thing that I think could be an issue, and I've brought this up. I mean, how many people out there who says I'm a long-term holder of Bitcoin, and I've just asked them. I said, if you drop dead tomorrow, what would happen to your Bitcoin? Would it just disappear too, or would your family be able to get it?
Yeah, I mean, me, I've got some things in place, but I think for most people, it would be lost. Knut Svanholm and I have had, long discussions about this, and I think, it's ultimately, it'll be a supply shock, which is ultimately fine because you don't really need elasticity in the money for an economy. It just means that, less of the money is moving around, and there's like an implied, amount of welfare. It's very hard to say how much of the Bitcoin, in total is lost, and it'll be very hard to ever interpret that. But, fundamentally, like, even if only 1 million coins were moving in the end of the 21 million, like, it would still be enough for the economy to function. So
yes, you also have divisibility.
Exactly. Well, that's the whole point.
But do you think that also might be a barrier to adoption? I mean, people aren't going to want to use. I mean, I never. Yeah,
not really.
It's too easy to lose.
It's a short-term barrier.
Yeah, I never would have gotten my older brother into Bitcoin simply because of the way I've seen him work on, do stuff on computers, and I'm just thinking, I'm not going to get him into Bitcoin because he might do something stupid and end up losing it. It's because I think there are people, people like that who maybe should not, maybe should stay away from Bitcoin just because they might.
For those people, custodial services are good enough. Honestly, that's the thing. So, like, in the end of the day, it'll. What's more important than self-custody is the option for self-custody. So that way, people who want that can choose it. People who don't have to. Like, even I have some Bitcoin in custody because that's like the stuff that I need access to, and it just makes more sense for me to for me to have that. And the other stuff that I self-custody is like the stuff that I'm just not going to touch for a long time. So.
And you also have the Bitcoin IRAs, and things like that.
Yeah, all that stuff.
I think the dumbest lost Bitcoin story I've heard was a guy told me, he said, I had my backpack and I went to the beach, and he said for some reason I just and then he says, my backpack, the ocean came up and took my backpack away. And I'm just like, why'd you do that? It's but literally was a case, where apparently his wallet was in the backpack and his wallet went out there with him.
Genius.
I suppose we'll have, now someday maybe 10 years from now, everybody will say, well, yeah, I bought Bitcoin in 2011 for $1 and I lost it.
Yeah, that happens today already.
I can imagine we'll have lots of people. You probably already got lots of people who are just lying about it, claiming, yeah, I bought some and I lost it. Maybe that's probably just baloney.
Yeah, honestly. Well, that story does sound baloney, straight up.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Alex Jones says, yeah, so and so gave me this laptop, and then I lost the laptop. Or,
Yeah, more often than not, that's not how it works.
There was also that story of the guy who apparently went through like the landfill to find a laptop, and then when he did maybe it was a laptop or a wallet, but then when he did find it, it wasn't worth it. He couldn't pay the fees to clean up, to get it back.
Yeah, once again, who knows? Who knows how much of that shit is true and how much of it is just strange, like hyperbole, basically.
Yeah, what do you think? Also, what do you think we're going to be able to do about some of the fees? Because it still seems like it can be a little expensive to buy and sell Bitcoin because of the fees. I mean, it's certainly not as cheap as buying and selling stock.
I mean, I don't know. The fees are the fees. They'll be around. I guess it's this is what the second, third, fourth layers, etc. Are about. Is if you can
and that's the thing I've said though too. If you've got a crypto exchange, there is no you just collect the fees. Don't do anything else. You can't lose if you just sit and collect all the fees. But they all had to do things stupid.
Totally. I mean,
yeah, with the sentencing of also 2 days ago was Ross Ulbricht's 40th birthday. You ever meet Ross?
Never met Ross. No, unfortunately. I mean, I don't think many of us actually met him, but he's a fucking legend, man.
I've met his mother certainly, but yes.
Yeah. Lynn is beautiful. I love her.
Yeah, she travels a lot. I think she's made that her career. And what do you think about the recent sentencing of Sam Bankman-Fried?
I mean, deservedly so. I mean, he's a turd, and it's just I mean, the injustice around him getting 25 years, which he'll probably end up getting a reduced sentence at some point, and be out in 10 or something like that.
Yeah.
That versus the fact that Ross has been in there already for 10 years or more, and may never get out is that fucking makes me so angry.
Yeah, I think it should make anybody angry. And we've had some other people, like there were some people up in, although they didn't get as much time, some people like the New Hampshire Crypto 6 sold Bitcoin to somebody, and then somebody ended up using the Bitcoin, to engage in fraud. So you got Ian Freeman and some other people who did. I had a show about them, just they only, I think maybe they got only a little bit, but it wasn't like what, I mean, they're going to be out of jail before they die, but it wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
And Ellison.
All right, man.
Ellison didn't get any jail time. She just says she could have to do restitution, I guess.
Who?
Caroline Ellison. The
ugly, weird-looking chick, yeah? That was with him. I mean, she didn't get any time, really.
If she wanted to pay off the money, and what she ought to do, go on OnlyFans, take off her clothes, and then just talk about crypto.
That's disgusting.
And people would pay that. Crypto people would pay for that. Oh, a naked girl talking about crypto. Yeah, they'll pay for that.
Yeah.
They'll pay for anything these days. But,
yeah. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, you got to. Where can we find you on the net nowadays?
On Twitter, basically. So if you can go svetsky.info, or my handle is showing up on the thing now. So yes,
Svetsky
writes, WRITES on Twitter,
and
you'll
get my links there. Good time to wrap up. You got anything else to say before we go?
That's it, man. No, look, thank you for having me on. I hope it was useful for people. I've got some more, unconventional opinions on things, but I hope it was valuable, and would love to do this again in 6 months.
Well, I'm glad to talk to you. It's always good too, because it's always good to talk to people about one subject, but they have knowledge on other subjects too, and you certainly do. Please buy my novel, Escape from the Village. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow the channel. Check out my Substack. I'm Chris Baker, and thank you, Alexander, and we're out.